The hardest part about fat loss is trying not to claw your eyes out all day long because you feel so hungry. But what if there was a way to make sure that the foods you eat actually keep you full, instead of making you feel like you are starving all day long? Aha! There is a way to do this. And we have evidence to show you which foods are actually going to keep you full for the longest period of time and give you the highest likelihood chance that at the next meal that you eat, you don't overconsume because you are ravenous from feeling hungry from the meal before. So that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to cover the Satiety Index. We're going to go through which foods are the most satiating foods on planet Earth and are the best for you to reach your fat loss goals, and some tips and tricks around it to make sure that you get the most out of it, okay? So back in 1995, there was a study done to create what's called the Satiety Index, okay? And what we did was we essentially fed people, I say we, the researchers, fed people equal amounts of calorie portions for various different foods. And then they recorded their fullness over the next 2 hours. They used white bread as a baseline, so they set white bread at 100, okay? And after 120 minutes, they had the participants go eat freely at a buffet. And what they did was they measured how much food they ate at the buffet 120 minutes after eating certain foods. And then they measured their subsequent intake, okay? And that was to validate their sensations of fullness of the tested food. So here are some main takeaways that we have from that study. Number one is that foods that are higher in protein, fiber, and water tend to produce greater sensations of fullness than foods that are high in fat. So let's think about this for a second. Zucchini, it has a lot of water, right? Broccoli has a lot of water and fiber. Steak has a lot of protein. These foods are satiating. When you eat them, you feel full. If you eat a lot of them, you feel really full, right? Per unit of calorie, that is, right? Think about eating 100 calories of broccoli. You get a lot of broccoli. But if you eat 100 calories of peanut butter, it's about that much, right? It's not very much at all. So you don't get very full from it. And so we want to choose foods that are high in protein, fiber, and water. Think about how full you get when you drink olive oil, which is a fat, right? If you were to drink some olive oil, you're not going to get very full because it's really dense in calories. And again, it's very low in volume, okay? We also found that more tasty foods tend to be less satiating, which is super sad because I would love to just eat ice cream all day and feel very full, but that's not how it works, okay? Now, this is mainly because they're high in fat and sugar and they're not as filling per unit of calorie, okay? And this is why diets that are high in ultra-processed foods tend to lead to weight gain, right? People gain weight when they eat McDonald's and Burger King, right? And other highly processed foods you just grab off the aisle when you're in the grocery store as well, okay? So let's dive into the best 8 foods that you can eat that have a high satiety index so you can reach your health and fitness goals without having to white-knuckle a diet and feel like food and eating and your hunger is constantly on your mind, okay? We're going to start with number 8. Number 8 is boiled eggs. And the satiety index score is 150%, meaning it is 1.5 times more satiating than white bread. Why is that? Well, in the egg scenario, it's mostly because of the protein intake. If you think about eating a half a dozen eggs is going to be, so that's 6 eggs, is going to be 420 calories. That's going to keep you a lot more full than eating 420 calories of white bread, which would be like 4 pieces of bread, right? 6 eggs, 4 pieces of bread, probably more full from the eggs, right? So eggs are a great option, full eggs. And they didn't test all the foods here, but I would bet that egg whites would be a lot higher as well in terms of their satiety index score. So they didn't test them, but fat loss hack, egg whites, really huge. Number 7, air popped popcorn. Air popped popcorn. It was 154%. So again, a little more than 1.5 times the satiety of white bread. Now, brands for this. I love Lesser Evil. I have no association or affiliate link or anything like that. But Lesser Evil popcorn from Costco, there's the Himalayan Gold or whatever it is. It's delicious. Okay. What happens with air pop popcorn is that the puffing of the air, it traps air and it creates a lot of volume. Okay. And volume is key when it comes to satiety because we have these stretch receptors in our stomach that when our stomach stretches, right, the receptors get activated and sends a signal to the brain that we're full. Because we have a lot of volume of food in us. And so if we can find foods that are high in volume but low in calorie, it is incredibly satiating. Okay? So air pop popcorn, number 7. Number 6, lean beef. Lean beef was 176%, so 1.76 times more satiating than white bread. Now, if you just imagine for a second eating an entire steak, you can understand why this is satiating, right? You probably feel full just thinking about eating an entire steak. They don't call it the meat sweats for no reason, right? I'm sure you've heard of the meat sweats. When you eat too much meat at a restaurant, you start sweating. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. But if you eat too much meat, you can start sweating, right? You feel terrible. You don't hear someone talk about the pasta sweats or the rice sweats. No, but the meat sweats, they're a real thing, right? And so why is that? It's a lot of protein, obviously, and it's lean. You want protein sources that are lean, that do not have a lot of fat content, because it's going to raise the calories and only be slightly more satiating. Okay, moving on. Number 5, I believe we're on now. Apples. 197%. So 1.97% times more satiating than white bread. Why is this? Well, apples are really high in something called pectin fiber, and an entire apple is about 100 calories. But that fiber is really crucial. The fiber in the apple, and we'll talk about this in a second when we get to some more fibrous foods, but the fiber in the apple is really helpful in staying full. Okay? It also has a lot of water content and a lot of volume, right? Again, apples, you can get a pretty big apple for about 100 calories. And so that is a very satiating food. Underneath that, number 4, oranges. Okay? Why are oranges satiating? Well, they scored 202%, which is essentially 0.02 times more satiating than white bread. Why is that? Well, they're very, very high in water, and they have pulp. And the pulp is fibrous as well. But one thing to note here is that the oranges, they take time to chew. And chewing actually increases our satiety as well. But the skin of the orange, it takes some time to chew. And doing that adds some oral satiety as well. Okay. Number 3, oatmeal. Oatmeal scored a little higher than oranges. It was 209%, so 2.09 times more satiating than white bread. And what happens with oatmeal is it has a lot of soluble fiber. And the soluble fiber thickens the contents of the stomach. Okay? And when you get that thickening of the contents of the stomach, well, we get a stretch reflex, and that increases our satiety as a signal to our brain, yada, 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 right? A pro tip here, though, is that you want to soak your oats before. You want to get them as enlarged as you can, because it's going to increase volume and increase water, right? And increase the contents of the stomach and take up more space. That's the key, right? Additionally, as a minor bonus here, is the fiber also helps you control your blood sugar, which can increase, if it gets elevated, it can increase your cravings, right? Now, as a side note here on oatmeal, I do believe that there are some individual differences. Personally, when I eat oats, I get very hungry. I feel hungrier after, actually, when I finish oats a lot of the time. And so take this one with a grain of salt. Other people have said the same thing. I've had a lot of clients that have experienced that as well. This is my just personal experience. I don't know if there's any research on it, but for some people, oats might not be the most satiating food. Okay? Moving on to number 2, whitefish. Whitefish was 225%, so 2.2 times more satiating than white bread. Why is that? Well, whitefish is very protein dense, and it's 0 fat. In addition to that, though, it also stimulates the release of GLP-1, which is what all these new weight loss medications and drugs, semaglutide, tirzepatide, it's what they target, right? The GLP-1s, the GLP-1 agonists. So we can actually stimulate that same pathway in a much less potent way than those drugs, obviously, but in a way that increases our satiety. And that's what those drugs do, right? Semaglutide and tirzepatide, the main mechanism of action is that they cause you to eat less. Why do they do that? Well, it slows gastric emptying, right? And so if we can slow gastric emptying, which is basically the contents of our stomach emptying into our intestines, then we can feel satiated longer. And so whitefish is a great way to kind of increase that process, right? Lastly, the number 1 most satiating food in the study in 1995 is boiled potatoes. 323%, 3.23 times more satiating than white bread. Okay, that is a very, very big difference in terms of satiety. So why is that? Well, they have lots of water, right? And you're boiling them, so they're going to absorb some water. They have a lot of fiber, and they're very high in volume for a very low amount of calories. And they slow gastric emptying. So it kind of wraps in all of these mechanisms that we just talked about kind of into one, except for the protein. It doesn't have the protein, but it wraps most of the mechanisms that create satiety into one food. And so that's why potatoes are an amazing way for you to increase your satiety and increase the chances that you can stick to your diet that might be challenging for you to lose weight, right? When we lose weight, we are gonna feel hungry in some way. We want to try to mitigate that as much as possible, and boiled potatoes are a fantastic way to do that. Okay? Now, these 8 foods we just went over, they're not the only foods that are high satiety. There are others as well. And the study in 1995 had limitations. They only looked at 38 different foods. And they didn't even look at variations of it. So they didn't look at baking a potato versus boiling it, right? But there are a lot of ways to be creative around this. You can bake a potato, right? Or have other types of potatoes, maybe sweet potatoes. And they're going to be very stationary as well. They're going to be exactly the same, probably not. But they may be close, right? Also, if you just think about how much of some foods you need to eat in order to get a considerable amount of calories from them, you can pretty much assume that what their satiety index is like, right? For example, to eat 1,000 calories of broccoli, you would need to eat 6.5 pounds of broccoli. That is so, you know how terrible you would feel? I would just be on the toilet for a month, right? If you eat that much broccoli, it would feel horrible. You have so much bloating, right? You can't even physically eat that much to get 1,000 calories. But 1,000 calories of peanut butter, 1,000 calories of ice cream, cake, you could probably crush that, right? So if you could start thinking about how much volume a food has for the amount of calories, then you can really start maximizing the foods that you can put into your nutrition plan so you can get the most out of it and have the easiest time losing weight on your diet, okay? So what we want to do here is start using some of these high satiety foods in your diet. And it's going to make fat loss so much easier for you. So the more that you can implement that, the better off you're going to be. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you start implementing some of the 8 foods or think about other foods that might help you as well. And I hope that it helps you on your fat loss journey here. So subscribe to my channel. And if you'd like my help one-to-one, you can start with the Cellular Blueprint Assessment, which is linked in the description here, which is basically how I start all my clients. We go through and figure out what the core constraints might be for you and that are holding you back from reaching your health and fitness goals. Okay? So you can get that link in the description. Otherwise, hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.